Jonathan, welcome to Waterstones.
Thanks for having me to Waterstones.
It's an absolute pleasure. After finishing your book, I thought, where do I begin when we sit down to talk about this book? It's very tricky because you talk about an awful lot of stuff in here. And actually, I went back to an episode of Queer Eye when you went back home to Quincy to see Miss Dooley at your school. It's a very emotional episode, and I always sense when watching it that there was probably more to it than you could probably say in the programme. And it feels like in this book you are finally able to speak your truth and to say exactly what you went through as a child. And it's an awful lot, isn't it?
Yes.
Was it very difficult to sit down in the first place and to start writing it? Or had you reached a point where you felt that you had to write it?
Kind of both. I think I definitely felt very strongly that I wanted to share my experience, and I wanted to share my experience of coming into this person that, people have gotten to know on Queer Eye and have gotten to know on, Gay of Thrones or my podcast. But I was ready to be more vulnerable and be able to kind of speak my truth so that I could more fully explain and come into every situation that I've been given. I think at the beginning of the success of Queer Eye, and as I was, experiencing this big, swell in my platform, I was I just think I was being a little bit timid. I wasn't quite sure if how much of my story I wanted to share. And then I think once I realized, how much suffering there really is in the community, I felt like I needed to, say that I don't always have it together. I'm not always a beacon of positivity. I struggle with all sorts of stuff, and I felt like it's important to be honest and transparent about that.
You do actually talk in the book about how your big fear was that people are used to seeing you a certain way on Queer Eye, being happy, gregarious, and the big worry about sharing something about yourself, which is dark and sort of dangerous in many ways, is that people might not like you afterwards. Will you still love me after I tell you all of this stuff? And there's a brilliant picture, or actually series of pictures on the back of the book, these different facets of your character, if you like, and they're very funny to look at, but also you talk seriously about why you have these different facets to your character, and part of it is to do with dealing with trauma, that when something traumatic happens, we have to put it somewhere, and then we also have different parts of it. Well, now I'm being happy, Jonathan, or as you were when you were younger, Jack. And therefore, these quite funny pictures actually tell a quite sad story, which is about how you've dealt with trauma on your own for many years, and then you've used therapy a lot, haven't you, to sort of to be able to actually deal with it.
Yeah, I guess I would challenge that it's a sad story, because I think that everyone has a relationship to trauma. One of my therapists always said, there's big T trauma and little T trauma. But also, pain is relative. So everyone has a different experience and a different relationship to pain. And also it's my belief that everyone has parts. We all have experienced trauma in some way. Some is more sharp and more acute and more obvious than others. But we have all felt rejection. We have all felt, othered at some point in our lives. I would think. And if you haven't, if you feel really strongly that you've never felt that way, my guess is that you have a very stubborn part that refuses to feel rejection. So we really all do have a multitude of parts that is within us. But I do think that I think that my particular parts are really entertaining. I actually have a lot of fun with them, know. There was a couple bleak years on and off there, and every once in a while I do pop off a little bit. I think my irritated part gets I don't write about that one as much, but I do have a little irritated part, and every once in a while that one will just and then I gotta deal with that one. But I think it's actually really normal for people to have parts.
As I said, when you went back to Quincy and saw Miss Dooley, you talked about being bullied there. You make a joke of it in the book, but you can tell that it was obviously very, very upsetting, and you had to deal with that on a daily basis, as you said. You talked as well about how, for your community, that is a daily problem, that they are being othered, they're being marginalised, they're being stigmatised. I suppose in a way this book has sort of motivated you to be far more vocal about some of those things, and I think particularly with your HIV diagnosis, and now that you've become almost a spokesperson for that. How do you feel about that? How does that responsibility weigh with you? Because it's obviously really important to you that what's happening in America with HIV treatments and availability, it's not where you would like it to be.
Especially in the United States, because of the dismissal of the HIV/AIDS Advisory Council in 2017, and the Trump administration's continued attack on Planned Parenthood, which provides over 700,000 HIV tests last year alone. That I did need to talk about it, especially because I wouldn't have known that I was positive if it wasn't for Planned Parenthood, because I didn't have insurance at the time, and that was like the clinic that I knew to go to, that was like that was where I lived, and that I could access like a full STI screening, which in a lot of states, the Planned Parenthood is the last place where you can access a full STI screening. And when you have to drive like 3 hours if you're sexually active to just go get screened, like, what does it mean if you're going to have to go there every 3 months to like see your doctor and maintain your medication and maintain that's incredibly hard for someone that's like dealing with whatever you're like, because in a lot of these states, like, poverty is like super duper high and discrimination is super duper high, and like mass incarceration is really, really high. And so when you put like all of these things together, especially in the United States, like, there is a perfect storm for like HIV to like be a constant public health threat and have it like not get better.
We've touched on some of the things that you have dealt with in your life, which have been very, very difficult. And throughout your life, you have had these various beacons of support. And I wanted to talk very briefly about your mum.
Yeah.
We also, of course, your co-presenters on Queer Eye, who've obviously become close friends. But I wondered how important it is to have support from them and support from your mum, not only in dealing with the things that you've been dealing with in recent years, but also in putting those things on paper and sharing them with the world.
Well, they just like couldn't be any more supportive if they tried, especially, you know, the other members of the Fab Five. I mean, nothing that is in this book is like anything, unfortunately, that they didn't know, like, after like having known me for like 36 hours. In Bobby's case, like maybe 6. Tan and Anthony probably like 8. And then Cromwell probably like 12 hours, like, after me. Like, they already pretty much knew like the complete contents of what were in this book, because I'm kind of an open book. So they've been incredibly supportive and loving. And my mom has been like has been an unwavering source of support and feedback, regardless of whether or not I want to hear it, which is, I think, is such a beautiful thing about parents. So my mom is just amazing, and like I think really the 4 of us, or the 5 of us, are we really want the best for each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that in ensembles of people that are successful, I think that is a quality that is very hard to encounter. And we all really cheer each other on and really like love being together when we are together. And I couldn't have asked for a better group.
Going back to the beginning, that question, will you still love me after I've told you these things about myself? This would be a hard enough question if you were just simply telling a friend or a family member, but you have told the world, and any author will know that when you send your book out into the world, waiting for people's reaction to it is a really sort of slightly terrifying part of the process. Mm-hmm. How have you been dealing with that, and how has it been to have people react to what you've shared?
Well, I felt really super supported and very much embraced, and that has been, very comforting. I think that I have like this annoying tendency to like focus on negative things like more than positive things, which is like a human condition issue, which like I interviewed a really interesting neuroscientist about that, and it turns out like we're wired like for love and acceptance, and when we experience like rejection, like we're like, ew, like, like the acceptance and love feels like that's what's supposed to happen, and then the other stuff is like, ew, what is this? So it's like it can get, like, we can get stuck, but I really have felt resoundingly embraced, and there has been moments like since, like there have been Twitter moments where like I, made like a gorgeous like Elizabeth Warren endorsement and like that, so I've experienced like a lot of like, rush to judgment, like some negativity that like stung, especially when I was like really, really just super vulnerable and raw. And I think also the space between like the New York Times article coming out on like that Saturday and then the book coming out on Tuesday, I think was also something that was like, I needed to like sit with my cats and my mom and just like, this is so scary. But I have felt embraced, and I felt that the response to the book has been just so positive. And also the outpouring of people that have like reached out to me, that have shared with me like how the book has helped them feel more seen and less alone in all of the different ways that like they see themselves in my story, is like makes it very worth it.
Anyone who's seen you in the Fab Five on Queer Eye will know that you often talk about being true to yourself, which is sometimes easier to say than it is to do. So as somebody who's read the book, I just wanted to say thank you for being so honest and putting it out there, because as you say, for other people to read that and to see what you've been through, I think will be a huge help. So
thank you.
Thank you.